Hey, my name is Raj Parameswaran and I'm part of the developer relations team for Admob. And I wanted to talk about getting started with the Admob SDK on iOS today. Just an overview of what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to go through the prerequisites that you need to get started. I'm going to go through our banner example that we have online, how to use that and how to use that as a baseline for some of your other apps, how to work with different ad formats with our SDK, some of the targeting options that we have for the ad request object, how to listen for different ad events. This is where you could do things that are custom when an ad is received or when an ad fails to receive, for example. I'm going to talk a little bit about our mediation SDK, which is the same SDK, and as well as getting going with interstitials. So the prerequisites to get started with the Admob SDK. You're going to need to have iOS version 4.3 or later, as well as Xcode version 4.5 or later. You can install the Google Admob Ads SDK off our developers page, which is at developers.google.com/mobile-ads-SDK. We also do recommend that you read our documentation, which you can also find at developers.google.com. And you're going to have to create a publisher account on admob.com to receive live ads. So getting started with the banner example. The first thing you're going to have to do is actually include the Google Admob Ads SDK that you download into your Xcode project. This can be done by including it using the right-click and add files to banner example menu. You're going to have to add everything in the actual folder except for the add-ons. Unless you're actually using one of the add-ons. The add-ons include some of the mediation custom event stuff, which I'll talk about later on, as well as double-click and search ads header files. You're going to have to reference the necessary frameworks. We've got a list of frameworks that you need to use in order to use Admob. Ad support is one of the big ones. These are typically pretty fundamental across the board. And the last thing that you need to do that a lot of people actually forget is that you've got to add this Objective-C linker flag to your other linker flag section in your build settings. Finally, to get up and going, you just need to replace the ad unit ID that's actually in the project with your own, and you should be able to receive live ads. So let's go through an example and see what this looks like. So here I've got my banner example, which I downloaded from developers.google.com. I haven't changed anything. I've just opened it up here. When we open this, we'll see that there's a Google Admob Ads SDK folder with broken references. This is to just show you that you do need to include the Admob Ads SDK. Let's delete this one and add the Ads SDK that we downloaded. So this is the one that we just downloaded. We'll include it. I forgot to not include the add-ons folder, so I can remove that, remove the references. So now that we've got this, let's look into our build settings to make sure that we've got all the frameworks that we need. So we've got StoreKit, Ad Support, Foundation, Core Graphics, System Configuration, Message UI, Audio Toolbox. That looks like all the frameworks that we need. The other important step is to make sure that our linker flags actually has Objective-C, which it does. This comes for you out of the box once you download the banner example, but if you're starting a project from scratch, these are things you're going to have to keep in mind. So we can go into our banner example view controller, and we'll see that where we set the ad unit ID, we're going to have to replace that. There's a sample ID in the slides, which I can copy paste. So if I put this in here, this should actually return slides. I'm going to request test ads for now, just because we're working in the simulator. I'll talk about how this works later on in the slides. So I just clean my project. I'm going to run it. And we've got test ads. I want you guys to pay attention to the console as well. We output this message that says what's the ID that you have to use for testing. For the simulator, you can use GAD simulator ID, but for devices, you're going to have to use this. You're going to have to use this ID. And there's some ad events here that we used, which I'll talk about later on. So it was pretty easy to get up and going with the banner example. We just ran the project. We saw it running in our simulator. let's look a little bit at the code and see what's going on. In our banner example view controller header file, we define a GAD banner view. There's a GAD banner view header which defines this object which basically inherits from UI view. And in our banner example view controller implementation, we actually initialize this view, give it an add unit ID, a root view controller, and add it into our view hierarchy. The reason that you need to give it a root view controller is so that when you click through, it needs to know which view controller to come back to. I can just quickly show you this by clicking on this. So we're presenting this modal view on top, and when we come back, we need to know to actually put back the original view controller that you were working with. And the final step is to actually load a GAD request object, which hits our servers for an add. So let's talk about different add formats that you can use. The standard banner is the one that's used the most on phones. That is what we actually have here, a 320 by 50 banner. We've got some tablet formats as well, medium rectangle, which is 300 by 250. We've got the full banner and the leaderboard. The leaderboard spans the width of the device when you're in a tablet format. We've also got this new thing we introduced a couple of SDK versions ago called Smart Banner. And what we try to do with Smart Banner is actually smartly detect the width that you're in and extend the add view so that it takes up that full width. On iOS, you basically define this using your Smart Banner or Smart Banner Portrait or Smart Banner Landscape constants, which tells you which orientation you're in, and we actually do the rest for you. So let's talk about some of the add request options that you can actually use. One of the fundamental ones is actually enabling test mode. You don't want to test with live ads generally because you want to avoid generating any false impressions. So what you do is you can actually define identifiers that you put into your GAD request object. We've got this test devices method which takes in an array of identifiers. We do ask that if you're using a device for testing, if your device is running iOS 6 or greater, you use Apple's new IDFA identifier, which is available from their ad support framework. If you're using lower than iOS 6, you can actually use the UDID identifier. So if we go back to our example, we'll see that in request add test devices here, I've actually talked about using the GAD simulator. And this actually is just a constant we've defined for the GAD simulator. If we were going to define an object, we could actually, if we were going to define another device, we can actually put in, for example, this in here. And that should work fine. Targeting. Targeting is another important thing that you can specify to receive better ads to your application. We do ask though that if you're using location and demographic targeting information, you only use this if your application is already asking this information for for use with your application. So if your application is already using maps and needs the user's current location for that, then you'd probably be better off using location with your ads as well. But we ask that you don't use location just for your advertisements. We've got some pretty simple APIs for working with these targeting options as well, as you can see. Ad events. So ad events are actually really important. They allow us to track the life cycle of the ad, what happens, and allows you as a developer to do custom things when these ads are being presented, when they fail to receive, when a user clicks through, for example, or even when a user comes back from having gone outside of your application because of an ad. So in GAD banner view delegate, which is a protocol, you've got some of these methods. All of these methods are optional. You don't have to implement any of them. The Admob SDK will work if you don't have any of these implemented, but we do recommend you implement them for a number of reasons. So let's go back to our example and take a look. As you can see here, I've implemented add-view did receive ad, which just logs that my ad was received successfully. I've implemented add-view did fail to receive ad with error, which talks about what kind of error came back for me not receiving ad. let's implement another one here. Wait. So let's talk about what happens if will present screen. So will present screen, if we actually look into our GAD banner view delegate, will present screen is called just before presenting the full screen view. So this probably means that the user has clicked on your ad. So if we could go back, we can say user has clicked on ad. So let's clean this. Let's run it again. We've got our ad that shows up. Click on our ad. We've got our console says user has clicked on ad. We can go back and we can dismiss the ad. We've also got a ad event for that you can plug into as well. So play around with that. There's a lot of power there. It's pretty easy to get up and going. All you have to do is actually set the delegate on the GAD banner view to be whatever is implementing the protocol. So just to see what that looks like in code, we set the delegate for the add banner view to be this banner example view controller class. And the reason we can do that, of course, is because the banner example view controller class conforms to the GAD banner view delegate protocol. Mediation. So what mediation actually allows you to do is work with different ad networks. When you have different ad networks, it's a pain sometimes to get up and going because all of them have their own APIs. So Admob allows you to use different adapters or custom events to basically just use the Admob API to request ads from multiple ad networks. This allows you to maximize revenue for yourself. It's very easy to get up and going. All you have to do is hit mediation.admob.com and configure a mediation placement for yourself. As you can see in this example, we've set up a mediation placement which returns at Admob network ads 50% of the time, as well as house ads the other 50% of the time. Integrating into your example is super easy. All you have to do is change the ad unit ID that you're working with. So let's swap out this mediation ID with the ID that we were using here. So if we do that, and let's try to get back live ads on our simulator. I'm going to comment this out for now. And if we run that, like that, you're getting back ads using our mediation system. So we've got a lot of ad networks on board, but we don't have all of them. And there are times when publishers come to us and say they want to integrate with ad network X or ad network Y, or even want to do something custom that doesn't involve an ad network. So this is where custom events comes into play. You can set up a custom event on your mediation placement that either integrates into an ad network that we don't already have an adapter for, or does something else. I'm going to show you a really cool example now where instead of actually showing an ad from an ad network, I'm going to try to pull in a UI image and show that. So let's go back to our example. So I've already got some classes defined, so I'm going to add that to this file. Got some custom event code defined. So let's look at this code. So to define a custom event, you've got to conform to the GAD custom event banner protocol. We've got an error here which says that protocol doesn't exist. The reason for that is we actually removed the add-ons folder. So let's add back the mediation part of that folder. If we go into add-ons, mediation, we don't have to copy it in because it's already there. And that GAD custom event banner is there. So if we go back to this and clean, that error should go away. So we're conforming to the GAD custom event banner protocol. We probably don't need to conform to the GAD banner view delegate protocol in this specific example. we could remove this code. And let's look at what we do here. We've got this one method that you need to implement. And what that method does is when a banner is requested, it basically hits this method when it's time for your custom event in your waterfall. In this specific example, we create a UI image with the image called custom event add. I've got this PNG here, which is a 320 by 50 picture of a very cute cat. And I create an image view with that, and I actually call my did receive add callback with that image view. What happens here is it will get put into the view hierarchy once this method right here is called. So let's look at what you have to do here. I've already set up a mediation placement that actually has this. Here's the add unit ID for it. So if I go into here and actually change the add unit ID here, notice that I don't actually have to change anything with the way I'm setting up my ad. This should just work, hopefully. So if we run this, we've got a picture of a cute cat. So just to go over, I guess, exactly what I did right there, we've got this GAD custom event banner protocol that you've got to conform to, and we've got this request banner add example. You could actually give it a parameter label as well. These are things that you define in your Admob front end. You can do different things with that depending on what kind of parameter and labels are passed through. There are a bunch of add events that you do have to conform to. So in my specific example, because I knew that the image would always come back, I just called did receive add straight away. If you remember, I just called did receive add in my request banner add method. However, if you're implementing another ad network, what you probably want to do is map these methods to callbacks that the ad network provides you. So the final thing I'm going to go through is working with interstitials. Interstitials are full screen advertisements that pop up and try to give you a rich experience working with advertisements. Going with interstitials is super easy. All you have to do is define a GAD interstitial, and the rest of it is very similar to going with GAD banner views. The one difference, though, is that when you do request an interstitial in this example, it doesn't show right away. If you can see here, in interstitial did receive add, you actually explicitly call the present from root view controller method. So let's open up a interstitial example here. So I've got my interstitial example that I downloaded from developers.google.com. And exactly like last time, we've checked to make sure that all the frameworks are included. We haven't added the Admob SDK here, so let's add those. And exactly like last time, we don't need this until we see that there's a broken reference or something similar because of it. And if we look in our build settings, under linker flags, we've already got the Objective-C linker flag. So this code actually shows off a splash interstitial, which is a little bit more advanced, which I don't want to show off for the sake of this example. So let's comment that out, and let's get an ad unit ID. I believe that my ad unit ID for my banner example should work for a test interstitial ad. And if we put that to our interstitial ad unit ID, notice that this is getting called when we define here. So we could actually, instead of just calling into the app delegate because we're not using the splash interstitial, let's just define it here. Makes it easier to see. So I've cleared that. So let's run this and see what it looks like. Notice that here, once I load the request, in interstitial did receive add, I actually automatically present it. Like I said, you don't need to present it right away. but it's definitely an option as well. And the simulator is being used by a GAD banner example. So let's kill that and run this again. Looks like it. Cool. So we've got an iPad simulator up here with a show interstitial button. If we look at the code for my show interstitial button, all it does is define a GAD interstitial, set its delegate, and then load a request. So let's do that. And here's an interstitial example. You can typically play with this. You can dismiss it. And if we look at the delegate for GAD interstitial, there are a bunch of methods which are very similar to the GAD banner view delegate methods, which means you can still do things like do something custom when the interstitial is dismissed, do something custom when it's shown. If you have some sort of gameplay that you have, you can pause that. If you have an animation going on in the background, you probably want to pause that. So that's pretty much all you really need to get up and going with the Admob SDK. I've got some resources listed out here. If you want any further information, you can download our SDK off the developers.google.com page. This is also where our documentation is as well, so feel free to check that out. We've actually got a developer forum, which I want you to check out. It's actually me and some of the other members of our developer relations team that are answering questions there, so feel free to ask any integration questions you have. We've got a blog where we try to post cool integrations we can come up with. Recent examples, we're working with CocoaS 2D, for example. And we've got a Google project hosting site where we put up our own samples. Thanks, and hope you have fun trying to get started with Admob.